But right now, I want to introduce my guest here on the State of the Saints podcast. He is a two-time Super Bowl winning champion. He's also a part of CBS Sports headquarters, and you can also check out his podcast, All Things Covered, along with legendary All-Pro future Hall of Famer Patrick Peterson. I'm talking about my guy B-Mac, Bryant McFadden. B-Mac, how you doing, man?
What's happening? I'm doing pretty good. Thank you for having me.
Man, thank you for being here. I really do appreciate it. I know you're a hardworking man these days, covering NFL as well as college football, man. But thank you so much for your time.
It's always a pleasure, man. Anytime I get a chance to jump on with you, man, we have a great, informative, entertaining show. So I'm ready to rock and roll.
Yeah, man, no doubt about it. Yeah, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit. We were talking about Sean Payton as you just got on. Yep. And, people were talking about, Sean Payton. He was on the Kay Adams show up in Adams on yesterday morning. And he was talking about coaching again. And a lot of people feel like, he misses the Saints organization, as far as like some of the things that he was saying on the show. But what are your thoughts on Sean Payton? Like, where do you see Sean Payton? Do you see him coming back into the league? Because it seems like he's gotten comfortable as an analyst. He's pretty good at it. Do you see him coming back into the league maybe next year or the year after?
No question I do. I see him coaching once again for a few reasons. Number one, the love is still there for him. Clearly it is, right? Mm-hmm. I had an opportunity to have Drew Brees on my podcast, All Things Covered. Yep. And Drew Brees, and I asked Drew Brees, I said, what is more likely to happen? You returning to the NFL or Sean Payton return? He said easily he believes Sean Payton will be a coach at some point in time in the near future in the NFL. And then lastly, for me, you remember when the unexpected news surfaced that Sean Payton might leave the Saints or might not? Remember?
Yeah.
He was leaving the Saints for a particular opportunity.
Mm. Yeah.
It wasn't just to remove himself from coaching. It was to remove himself from coaching briefly, but to jump into another opportunity, which would be coaching. And of course, that was going to be with the Miami Dolphins. Now we hear it, you know what I mean? But I was one of the ones that kind of heard, bits and pieces of that potential story. Right. And I started saying certain things and people were saying I didn't know what I was talking about. Number one, I said that I didn't think he would be coaching for the Saints. If everybody's like, we hear this every year.
Right.
And number two, everybody was saying, Sean Payton and the Miami Dolphins doesn't make any sense. Why would he do that? But it wasn't just Sean Payton that was going to go to Miami, of course. Now we're hearing, and I said as well, Tom Brady would have some Miami Dolphin ties as well.
Yeah.
So with all that being said, yes, I think it's only a matter of time before Sean Payton returns to the NFL. I guess the bigger question would be, what job is super attractive for him to go ahead and say, yes, sir, I'm back?
Yeah. I mean, one job in particular, B-Mac, is the Carolina Panthers job. Matt Rule just got fired a couple of days ago. And of course, Sean Payton is out there, but we know that the Carolina Panthers and the New Orleans Saints are rivals. Can you see Sean Payton possibly becoming a coach of a team like the Carolina Panthers? Do you think that he will actually do something like that, or maybe one of these other teams out here that may be looking for a coach next year?
You know what? The question in regards to Sean Payton, what is super important to him, right? Is it total, complete control, or walk into a situation the roster is already assembled and you might not have that type of control? So to answer your question, I don't think Carolina would be an ideal destination for him because Sean Payton is the offensive-minded guy. He loves calling plays, and he loves being able to do so with a more than serviceable guy at the quarterback position. Right. And it's safe to say the quarterback of the future for Carolina is not currently on the roster.
Right. Good point.
And you don't know who that guy is, who that guy will be, how he will look, and how, will he develop. So I don't know. I would say no to Carolina right now. I think Carolina's in a bad spot.
Yeah.
They don't have resources. They traded away a lot of assets for guys that are not doing anything. They gave up a lot to get Sam Darnold, gave up a lot to get C.J. Henderson. Who knows if Christian McCaffrey will be there after this year?
Yeah.
So I don't know how appealing that would be to Sean.
Yeah. I mean, I just think that when you listen to him talk, he wants stability. Yeah. And I think he wants to really kind of, do his own thing. And he wants the back end of the general manager as well as the organization. And right now, I just think that Carolina has some pieces. They got some talent on the team. I'm not going to take that away from them, but I do feel like there's a level of instability when it comes to like the organization as of right now, and I think it's something that they need to fix before they can get a guy like a Sean Payton. But I do want to talk to you about the New Orleans Saints, and it's been a struggle this season. Okay, they started off with a magical comeback versus the Falcons, then they lost 3 straight. That heartbreaking loss in London, the double doink, but they come back, beat the Seattle Seahawks, get to 2-3, and Andy Dalton has been a quarterback over the last couple of weeks. Your guy Jameis Winston has been dealing with some injuries throughout the season. What are your overall thoughts about the Saints, how they started with Jameis Winston and how they look now with Andy Dalton after those 2 games?
I think my overall assessment for the New Orleans Saints so far in 5 games has been disappointment. Honestly, I didn't think the Saints would be below 500 in the first ball games. I really liked the Saints to win the division. Right. During training camp, during the preseason moments, I felt like the Saints roster-wise had enough to be able to win the division, especially if you look at the success they've had against Tampa. And then, of course, it's basically it was only a 2-team race. Before week 1 kicked off, we felt like it would be a 2-team race in the NFC South with the Buccaneers and the Saints.
Right.
In regards to, play of Jameis, outside of that first ball game, I think he hasn't been healthy. Of course, it sounds like he got injured in the Falcon ball game and just continuing to play, but he hasn't been healthy. And because of that, we haven't seen the numbers that we thought we would see, looking back how well he played last year before the season ended injury to his ACL. Alvin Kamara has been in and out of the lineup as well, right? We know how important he is to the success of the offense. Michael Thomas has been in and out of the lineup as well. Heck, he hasn't even gotten to a rhythm yet because he got injured before he can kind of get into the flow of things with the quarterbacks and the rest of the guys offensively. So it's just been a 5-game season so far of turmoil. But get this, though. You're still 2-3. There's a lot of football left to be played. A lot of football left to be played. And at the end of the day in the NFL, just win. No such thing as style points. This isn't the NFL doesn't have a BCS power ranking or playoff ranking. If you lose, you're gonna fall in the polls. That doesn't matter. It's not like college football. Just win. So people say, well, they barely beat Seattle. I don't care. A win is a win because you want to stack win after win after win. And like you talked about with the Saints, the games they lost, they found a way to lose. The Minnesota Viking games, they found a way to lose that game. This past Sunday, they found a way to win. So that is one building block in putting forth the steps to be able to continue to stack more wins on top of wins.
Yeah. I mean, the self-inflicted wounds, I mean, in these games that they lost, I mean, it's just unbelievable. I mean, the turnovers, the game versus Carolina, Alvin Kamara fumbles, a player that never really fumbles, but it turns into a touchdown. I mean, they have found ways to lose games. And unfortunately, it kept them behind the 8 ball. But now, hopefully they'll be able to, right the ship. But I do want to ask you about the quarterback position. We're talking about Andy Dalton, Jameis Winston. Okay. We've been talking on, the State of the Saints podcast about Andy Dalton's performance. If Andy Dalton can string off 4 or 5 wins for, or how long Jameis is out, do the New Orleans Saints, as soon as Jameis gets healthy, put him back into the lineup, or do you continue to go with Andy Dalton?
My personal answer, because I'm a Jameis guy, I love him as a quarterback. I think he's a talented guy. My personal answer would be to put Jameis back into the lineup. But speaking from the eyesight of an organization, I think they would stick with Andy Dalton. And the reason why is because contractually speaking, you're not tied to Jameis long term.
Right.
So you're still trying to figure out what is next moving forward after this year. Yeah. And if Andy Dalton is hot and they're winning ball games, then it doesn't necessarily have to be on the arm of Andy Dalton, but just because he's in the saddle, he's winning ball games. They're winning ball games. Yeah. It's a different situation than what they have in Dallas with Dak Prescott, because Dak Prescott, money-wise, everything is tied to Dak Prescott, so you're going to put the money out there.
Right.
You know what I mean? Jameis has a nice contract, but it's not as lengthy and as intense as Dak Prescott. So Cooper Rush can beat the Eagles this Sunday night. Dak Prescott can come back in another 3 weeks, and Cooper Rush can still be undefeated. Guess what's going to happen? They're going to insert Dak Prescott back in there because that's where the money is.
Yeah.
And they paid him as the face of the franchise. The Saints didn't pay Jameis as the face of the franchise. They basically paid Jameis as the right now for the franchise.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I just hate that it happened that way because I don't feel like he, really truly got a fair shake. I think that a lot of the injuries that he sustained, I think he was trying to fight through them, and he had limitations, and I think that a lot of the decisions that he did make, I think that because of the injuries, he wasn't able to successfully perform them. So it's unfortunate, man, but we know that this is a results-driven league, and, it depends on, how well that you're playing or how good the team actually looks. But just the overall scope of the New Orleans Saints, I got to talk about Dennis Allen, the head coach of the Saints. What is your overall opinion of Dennis Allen so far? Does he look like he's a guy that can be able to lead the Saints in the future? Or just does he look like a coach that's kind of like a substitute teacher waiting for the real teacher to show up the next day?
That's the question. The thing about Dennis Allen, it's been a rocky 5-game stretch,
right?
But he has an opportunity to right the wrongs in regards to the opinions about him as a head coach. Yeah. The thing about Dennis Allen, though, is I oftentimes find myself thinking about his first experience as a head coach.
Yeah.
And how left that went, right? So now when we see the mishaps, the self-inflicted wounds from the players and all of that definitely goes back to coaching, not looking prepared, starting the games off slow and things like that. It's like, whoa, these are things that kind of followed him this first stint. You know what I mean? And I understand for Saint fans, everyone was pulling for Dennis Allen because he did such a great job with the defense, and you felt like if he was the head coach, you kind of keep everything in place for the defense. But one thing I know about the game of football, especially in the NFL, some coaches are better suited as coordinators than head coaches.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that now for Dennis. I'm not saying that right now. What I'm saying, some coaches are just more suited. They're better suited as a play caller, as a coordinator, than a head coach, a guy that's overseeing everything, because that's a different type of pressure. Let's see which is better for Dennis. It's still a lot of ball left to be played. But I can tell you this much, regardless of the injuries, regardless of what is going on, if the Saints don't make the playoffs, it's a disappointment. It's a disappointing year, hands down.
Yeah, no doubt about it. My final question, I got to follow up with this. Now, you've been in the locker room, for many years. And a lot of Saints fans, they'll say comments like, well, why don't he put his foot down? Like, why don't he, go and, hold somebody accountable? Like, can you bring us into a locker room and what is on players' minds, like, when it comes to a coach? Like, I'm pretty sure you all can see if a coach is being like sincere or he being phony, right? I have to believe that players can actually see that, right?
Yeah. And for the people who feel like, or they question a coach and why he don't put his foot down, why he don't do this, why he don't do that, how do you know he's not doing that? You only see him on game day. You only see him on game day on the sideline. You don't see him on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, when there's a direct relationship back and forth with those players. We don't know if he is or if he's not putting his foot down. And a lot of coaches don't like to show any extra antics on the sideline because you're in the flow of the game. Emotions are already high. You don't want to lose a player emotionally because you're kind of teeing off on them. If there's a better way to get your point across.
Right.
So for those individuals who feel like Dennis Allen or another coach of the Saints, they need to do this, you don't know. You only see them for a short amount of times on Sunday.
Right.
So you don't know what they're doing. But in regards to players knowing and being held accountable, that's the name of the game in the NFL. Because we know one thing as NFL players, if you don't do what you're supposed to do, and if you don't do it in a consistent way, you won't be out there very long.
Yeah.
Your leash is not as long as some players' leash based on the position they play and based on the money they're getting. And to whom much is given, much is expected. The bigger that paycheck is, the bigger the expectations become as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I just think that like you just mentioned, I mean, you being a former player, I mean, you've been inside the locker room. We only see like like you said, if we see a practice, if a training camp being out there, but we don't really see like the ins and outs. So I guess we don't know. But I look at Dennis Allen. I mean, the jury's still out about him. I try to give him a chance because I feel like B-Mac is pretty hypocritical, right? On one hand, I'm supporting Jameis Winston because I'm like that 30 for 30 was an outlier. So how can I sit up here and say, okay, I support a guy who had a down year and not support a coach that basically had like the same thing, right? So
exactly.
Yeah, both going to a different organization, and you think that the narrative is going to change, but I mean the jury's still out about him. My final question I have for you it involves player safety. Chris Olave, he took a nasty hit when he scored a touchdown. Cornerback Kobe Bryant for the Seattle Seahawks slung him down. You seemed like he was out for a few minutes. Concussion seems to be a really big hot topic, and then some people are saying that was actually the excuse for that whole Grady Jarrett roughing the passer call. As a defender, what are your thoughts about first that roughing the passer call and also the issues with concussions? What are your thoughts about that? Do you feel like the league needs to kind of tighten that up, and do you think it's going to affect how players come back into the game? Like how you got a couple days of protocol. You think that's maybe going to get extended? How do you think they're going to approach this going forward?
Well, the unnecessary roughness calls that we saw Sunday and Monday, the Monday night game on Chris Jones, were horrible.
Right.
Bad. And the thing about that call, you can lose ball games because of bad calls.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's hard to get over that. And remember, in that situation, that was third down with Tampa. Atlanta was going to get the ball back with more than enough time to put a touchdown on the scoreboard to either tie it or win it by one or something like that, whatever the case was. Luckily for Kansas City, they were able to still win that ball game. My thoughts on these penalties and how they're trying to police and protect quarterbacks, okay, I get it. But make those calls reviewable. The same way you review a touchdown, make those calls reviewable, because it's hard for a referee with human eyes to be able to determine in a split second if someone was trying to be rough with that quarterback and commit unnecessary roughness, or it was just a flow of the game and there was no ill will intent on that player. Right. With Chris Jones, there was no ill. He was trying to muscle the ball away. He just happened to fall on the quarterback.
Right.
The only thing he could do is make himself disappear, but that's not possible. So if he's trying to get the ball, not to mention most of these quarterbacks are big and athletic, so you just don't want to go up there and just tap them. You want to make sure you have them in your grasp. In that situation, you review that, man, that's not, come on, man. He didn't dive him in the ground. He didn't push his body on him in the ground. He just happened to fall on the man. It's hard to tell a 300-plus pounder that while you going down, try to remove yourself off the band while muscling the ball away. Not physically impossible. Then with Grady Jarrett, the thing that surfaced for the referee's mindset was when Tua got slung down. Right? Yeah. It wasn't by the same force, but it was kind of the same thing.
Right.
Which is wrong. Grady Jarrett didn't sling Tom Brady down with the force that the player slung Tua down. So review it. Let's go. I don't care nothing about where it might slow the game up. It makes sense. It's worth it.
Right.
To get it right or to get it wrong.
Yeah.
And for fans to say, well, no, for the Buccaneer fans to say, well, no, that was right. No. Think about if this was the other way around.
Right.
And your defender did that to Marcus Mariota. Just imagine how hot you would be. So you got to be fair.
Yeah.
So they should make these things reviewable, hands down, the same way they review touchdowns. In regards to the concussion, let's keep it real. There was nothing wrong with the protocols. There was nothing wrong with the protocol. The issue was they didn't follow the protocol the right way.
Wow.
Because we've seen over the last 4 or 5 plus years when guys look like they're dazed, they take their helmets away from them, they come to the sideline. And usually those guys don't come back in the ball game.
Yeah.
For them to sit here and give us a bogus excuse about the reason why he seemed disoriented was because of a back and ankle injury, stop that. So now, because you guys messed up, you're going to police everything to the extreme.
Yeah.
To cover up the mishap that you messed up on and to say, we got to change the protocols. The protocols were good. They just weren't followed.
Yeah. I feel bad for players like that, because I think about you all. I mean, you're competitors, right? You want to play, and if there's a chance that you can play, you're not going to say no, I can't play. And I just think that they have to be able to, like you said, follow the protocols. But I also think when it comes to some of these calls, B-Mac, I understand the NFL, there's such a small margin for error, right? I don't care if it's one of the worst teams in the league. If you're going up against the best, that team can still beat them, that because of the competition. So I just think about y'all train all year long to get to that particular point. You're winning games. Let's just say you go to the postseason, and a flag is the deciding factor, and people are just it happened. I feel bad, because you train the entire time to get to those particular points, and for a flag to come out to negate all that progress. Or people will say, oh, it's just week 5. But that week 5 game can affect your playoff implications later on in the season. I want to say, was that it was one of the replacement refs when they called that play, and who ended up losing? I think Green Bay ended up losing, but it ended up affecting their seeding or something like that. It's when you mess up, no matter how early it is, it can affect.
It can follow you.
Yeah.
Prime example. Let's look at Atlanta, which was a divisional game this Sunday against Tampa, because their offense didn't get a chance to get the ball back when they should have received the ball back. They didn't get a chance to score. They lost. That was a divisional game.
Yeah.
Now that could hurt them towards the end of the season when playoff implications are right there.
Right.
And you just needed that one game to solidify your status to get into the playoffs.
Mm-hmm. That's crazy.
That's the hard part. Referees, and I said this Sunday night, it's tough to watch the NFL when you're more concerned about the referees than the actual play of the game.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Come on.
That's a good point. They definitely need to tighten that up. Final question before we leave this topic: do you think referees should be full-time? That seems like that's a hot topic right now. Should they be full-time in your opinion?
I think they should. Now, how realistic is that? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But if they can't be full-time and go through the necessary loops to be able to be as flawless as possible, which they would never reach, but just as possible, then help them with things that could be reviewable.
Right.
Touchdowns could sometimes be a judgmental call. It's up for the rest to either put his hands up or have one hand say it's down, it's 4th down, whatever the case may be.
Right.
But what they did to help them was, let's review them. Let's see if that knee was down before or he actually broke the plane before his knee was down.
Right.
So now we see the uproar that these unnecessary roughness calls are calling. When there's a judgmental call and it's not plain as day, then let's see it. And also, too, make it general. How can you call Grady Jarrett for a personal foul when the player who slung down to it didn't get hit with a personal foul?
Yeah. Good point.
How is that possible? So don't have it one way. Make it a general way. This is what we're going to do.
Yep.
This is always going to be a personal foul. If you sling a quarterback down with that type of force, that's what we're doing. But if it's a judgmental call and the referee throws a flag, okay, man, let's review this. Because this could be, like you said, this could be the deciding factor of who wins and who loses.
Yep. And nobody wants that. Nobody wants to be sitting at home because of a referee mistake that happened in week 5. Like you said, it can definitely affect, the long-term ramifications of where your team is going to go and where they can be. So, but B-Mac, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. And look forward to hearing you on All Things Covered and all the, and also on CBS HQ. But let everybody know how they can get in touch with you, some of the things that you have coming up on the podcast as well as CBS Sports.
Well, sure. You can check me out on CBS Sports HQ as well, talking college football, fantasy football, betting, NFL. I have my podcast with Minnesota Vikings standout corner Patrick Peterson, All Things Covered. We have a YouTube channel as well. So if you like watching YouTube, give us a subscribe. The same can be said for podcasts. We can be found anywhere where podcasts are found, any platform near you. And I'm just doing what I've been called to do, which is talk football, man. Because of that, I haven't worked a day of my life.
And you do a great job of it, man. And we appreciate your time, B-Mac. Thank you so much. And look forward to talking to you and seeing your great content on your podcast and CBS Sports HQ, man. Take it easy.
Man, keep doing what you're doing as well, man. You one of the more faithful Saints fans I've ever came across, man. You diehard Saint from the time you probably could remember what football was to now, man. So keep repping your team and keep giving the quality content you're giving as well.
Hey, that's all I know, man. That's all I know. Sitting on my grandmother's floor at 4 years old. That's all I know is who that.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You take it easy, man.
All right.
All right, take care.